Alrighty, so we have a great article by John Marcus of the Hechinger Report, and it's on microcredentials. The article is called "The Urgency of Getting People Back to Work Gives New Momentum to Microcredentials."
I
Now,
have
the
to stop for
first,
a sec, Dave.
yeah,
I
yeah,
know you enough to know that you love this article. So
that's
I'm
right.
right on it. I know, but I'll let you do your thing. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm going to start. First of all, what the heck is a microcredential? A microcredential are bite-sized chunks of education that are narrow in focus and shorter in duration than a university degree. And if you can choose the right one, they can give you the skills and or a certificate to help you bag the job you are looking for or help you attain the degree you eventually desire. So when we talk about Microsoft, this is a big article, Mark. So I'm actually going to give a brief summary, and then we're going to
Sure, please
dive
do.
right into the things. So,
It's Hechinger Report. You got to expect to read 12 to
oh,
15 pages when I send you Hechinger Report one.
and there's so many great quotes, but I really do know that you want to dive into the quote. So I'm going to here's my outline. It first talks about why are micro credentials taking off, and it gives really four reasons. Number one, money. Number two, the growing skills gap. Number three, the length of time it takes to get micro credentials, and number four, the graduation success of micro credentials compared to traditional universities. And so, Mark, I'm just going to briefly throw some statistics out there. From 1989, the cost of a degree doubled. We all know that private education costs $75,000 a year, but the cost of a micro credential degree it can be as low as $160 per credit hour, while those of a traditional college is almost $600 per credit hour. But there's also a growing skills gap because, according to business leaders, only 11% of students have the necessary skills to adequately perform in their market. So they see a failure in traditional education in adequately preparing kids for the job market. And then the Heckins report really takes a point in time to saying that because of COVID, a lot of people are out of work and they only have money saved up for maybe 2, 3, 4 months maximum. But many of these micro credentials you can get in less than 10 weeks' time, and they are tailored to real life needs. So if you need to learn how to code, you can learn how to code specifically for this job and get that job. And then the main other thing it points out is the graduation success. That micro credentials are really grown out of the failure of traditional education to adequately prepare many of its students to even get the degrees that they've paid up for. 25% of current students quit after the first year. Only 40% of students get degrees after 6 years. There are 36 million dropouts who have gone to college with absolutely nothing to show for it. But meanwhile, 70% of students getting degrees at micro-credentialing institutions such as EDU or WGU, Western Governors University, finish in 2 years because many of them can get up to 27 credit hours for their previous work experience. So I'm going to stop there, Mark, and say, let's talk about micro-credentials.
Yeah, and I think they've even to say edX, not edu, but
That's right.
fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic intro and summary. So this to me is really, really exciting. In fact, I think this is the future. I think this is the future 50 years from now. Now, the article talks about one thing that's been difficult to get micro credentials to take off is just understanding the concept. People don't get it that easy. You can't just send flyers out and people don't get it. But I'll break it down. What they're talking about, for the most part, is what they also refer to as a stackable bachelor's degree. It's a stackable bachelor's degree. And so you take these certifications and you get skill sets that make you more marketable. They can increase your salary. They can lead to raises. And ideally, they don't have to lead to bachelor's. But that's the ideal. And what edX is trying to do along with Western Governors, those are the two big ones right now, although others are emerging quickly. For example, BYU is launching a very, very similar type program. And the University System of Georgia is trying to do something very similar right now on the associate's degree level. But the idea is you get this skill that increases your pay, that's practical, that employers want. You can get this certification in 2 to 3 months. And what's so good about it is it keeps people motivated because it's a short-term commitment. They see the value of what they're getting. They see the correlation to job pay and raises. And the dropout rate is so low because you're constantly getting positive, reinforcement. And what the article does is it compares it to a traditional bachelor's degree where after 6 years, you still have over 40% of people graduating with nothing. And the point it makes here is with these stackable degrees and stackable credentials, and by the way, edX is it's a courses that were created by both MIT and Harvard combined to do massive online, MOOC, massive online open course to the masses of people. And the CEO of edX coined the term micro bachelors. He actually trademarked it. And they've launched one already in computer science. You take these mini little stackable courses, and at the end of the day, you end up with a degree into computer science. And now they've added 3 more in writing, marketing, and data science. And they're expanding them even more. But the idea is with what you go for the traditional bachelor's, if you drop out, you have nothing. You just have a lot of debt and no degree. But with the stackable bachelor's, you're still marketable, just maybe not at the same degree as the bachelor's. And so because they also cost a lot less too, because this is online. And so the difference in per credit hour is significantly less. I mean, the article showed the difference in cost. It was like 166 a credit hour as opposed to well over 500. So you're talking about a third of the cost, constant reinforcement, shorter bursts, so it's easier to hold people's attention. People are seeing the return for their labor. And as Dave mentioned, they're doing some really creative things. For example, Western Governors is giving you 27 credits starting out for your life experience. Now, mind you, this is assuming this is probably somebody in their 30s or 40s or maybe even the 20s. You can't be a 16-year-old and just come in with 27 credit hours for your life experience all 16 years, But Dave, what do you want to say about what I've said or anything else I haven't said?
Oh, well, I want to expand to that. Yes. So let's talk about the credit hours. What these institutions like Western Governors have done, which is really smart, is they realize that those 36 million dropouts are part of their customer base. So if you've gone to college and you did 2.5 years or 3 years or maybe 1.5 years, and you think all those hours are a waste, they allow you to apply some or much of the time that you've already dedicated towards that degree. So it's a great way for people who have dropped out of the system to reintegrate into the system. And I thought that was amazing. I really thought that it's an indictment of our current university system. I mean, when you mentioned in your last podcast that for a private institution, pre-tax, it's $500,000.
I mean, the most expensive ones.
The most expensive ones, okay. So even if you're talking about, they mentioned $100,000 on average. I mean, that's really devastating to think that you would spend that type of money and not get something. But more importantly, we also talk about this concept of being a lifelong learner.
Exactly.
That any education that we get is by definition going to be obsolete incredibly quickly unless it's refreshed and updated. One of the examples that I read about was if you're in computer coding, and let's say you know how to code for Windows, and then all of a sudden your company switches and says, we need to code for Android. Well, you're not going to go back to MIT or to Urbana and learn coding when you can take a micro course that's going to take your existing skill set and tweak it or give you the ability to change that Microsoft coding to Android coding. So this is all the things that microcredentials does. It helps people get back into the system, and it helps people with existing skill sets keep their skill sets relevant for the changes of today and tomorrow.
Yeah, and this is hot, by the way. So if you look at edX, like I mentioned, the program created by MIT and Harvard, their enrollment increased 14-fold from March to April of last year. 65,000 more people came on, 14-fold increase. So there's clearly is a demand for this. And they're starting to expand into more and more different courses. Western Governors has created a partnership with Nevada, the state of Nevada, and they're rolling this out for teachers and special courses in leadership and other skill sets. And they're doing some smart things like if you complete these courses, you're getting a $5,400 bonus automatically. And so they're starting to link it really directly to the workforce. But I really think, Dave, now let's face it, the traditional bachelor's of arts, bachelor's of science, that's not going anywhere. It's been around for hundreds of years. Neither is living on a residential campus for some people, because that can be a transformative experience, and it's not going to be for everybody, but that's not going to become obsolete.
Yeah. But
things do change over time. And to me, this concept of the stackable bachelors, I really think, and 50 years from now, this could be a complete total disruptor.
Yes.
Because if you look at all the pros to this, you're getting credentialed along the way.
Yep.
So you're getting proven marketable skills that are valuable. That increases your motivation. That increases your incentive to stick with it, because you're seeing the fruit from your labor. Another thing is, when you're an employer and you're trying to get talent out there, I mean, if you can dip into someone that's getting these certifications and they now have skills that you feel can come in and do the job, and there's always going to be an element of learning on the job. Like, you're going to learn some things from being on the job. It can be a great way for you to get your hooks in on some real talented people early, and then you could build your incentive structure and say, listen, we'll pay you at this rate now for these credentials. You finish the stackable bachelors, and you'll get the $20,000, $30,000 raise, or whatever the number is. But there, one of the reasons why a lot of employers like to do programs like co-ops and internships is so that they can get their hooks and digs in on talented kids really early and make them an offer before their competition gets at them. And I see this as another thing that could be really attractive to employers. You're going to say something, Dave?
Yes, and I did want to make this distinction that I think it's very important that the article makes between a certificate and certification, and why certification is actually what the employers are really finding very attractive. A certificate is simply a statement awarded at the completion of a course of study. So, I mean, you watched a video, you attended a class, your posterior was actually on a seat for X amount of hours, and it says you were there, you completed a test, but it's not a guarantee that you actually know the skill sets that the course was teaching. Certification, on the other hand, is usually given by an industry association or union to certify that you have the skills to do a certain task. For example, I get certifications in advanced life support or in advanced trauma life support. And one of those is that you know how to do certain things, like you know how to intubate, like putting a tube down the throat. If you need to help some people breathe, you know how to operate a defibrillator to shock someone to life. So you actually, not that you've just attended the course, but you know the skills of the course. And in the context where only 11% of businesses feel that kids have the skills to be competent at the jobs that they require, that's very appealing to businesses, the certification aspect of it.
Yeah, and but I think that the other thing that's great just about the certifications is that they're so linking what they do to skills that the workforce needs, right?
Absolutely.
So this is not like theoretical abstractions in a lab somewhere. By the way, every now and then you do show you went to Princeton and Harvard, man. Most people just say their butt or their ass. You're like, my posterior.
Wow.
Your posterior's on a seat,
That's because I have my Chicago crudeness, and I just don't want it to bump up against your Atlanta genteel sensibilities.
Well, credit for adjusting. That was a good comeback. Comeback.
If you want me to substitute posterior for the A word, we can do that.
Oh, you're hilarious. But no, you can see I'm very excited about this. This to me could really be the future for 50 years from now. But even if it doesn't, even if the stackable bachelors doesn't end up replacing the traditional bachelor's, to the extent to which programs like these give people marketable skills. They're so flexible because you could have a union job and you're, working an assembly line and you don't really see any path to getting a bachelor's, but you've got a family of 3 or 4 and you're trying to take care of them. But the idea of taking a 2 to 3 month course and upgrading a skill, and then getting an extra $3,000 to $5,000 on your salary as a result of it, that can be incredibly attractive, whether or not you pursue the full degree or not.
And Mark, I got to say that, this is not so relevant for our podcast listeners because for the most part, our listeners and our kids are such high achievers. But, I work on the south side of Chicago where in many schools, the graduation rate from high school is less than 50%. And the idea of most of these kids to get any type of degree is just inconceivable. It's like they can't, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Well, they can't see themselves getting through 10, 15 steps. But if you went to many of these kids and says, okay, don't worry about the college degree. Don't even worry about city college. Would you be interested in a 10-week course that can get you a job to see you through the summer and pay your rent? I think that's a way of getting many kids into the educational system who have totally been disregarded to this point. So when I read this article, that's the potential I saw in it.
Well, that's why I said I know you're going to love it.
Yeah.
Because Dave and I often talk. He's so close to the inner city where he lives, works, and his properties, and he has a lot of Section 8 properties that people live in. So it keeps him close to sort of what's kind of happening in the hood. He often thinks from their perspective, like, what's going to take this kid who I cannot see going off and getting a 4-year degree? What is going to take them to a more sustainable life? And he thinks that way, where I'm a little more removed from that. And so I appreciate the perspective he brings. And so that's why I knew this would resonate with you, because it's something that you could see could really be applicable to a lot of people. And it's true for rural America also.
Yeah.
And it's true for blue collar. I think it really transcends race and, geographical location. It just has a lot of appeal, because the white collar person can just upgrade their credentials and go from maybe making 90 to 95. But the other person that's maybe working at Walmart and doesn't want to be stuck at Walmart for 10 years, or maybe even unemployed, this can, like you said, get them in the education system. And I think it's really important that we have a broad view of education, that we don't just think education equals college degree. No, education is anything that's growing and stretching your mind. So you want to make one final comment and then put a bow on it, Dave?
Yeah, I do want to make one final comment. So often in our podcast, we talk to kids and parents who are going to do great no matter where they go. And what they're really trying to do is go from a solid school to one that's exceptionally difficult to get into. And we know that the difference between that is not truly going to be transformative to their life. It might have some added benefits, but it's not going to change their trajectory because they already have so much going for them. But when you have kids who their option is to have no income whatsoever, to have no education whatsoever, to have no middle class skill sets whatsoever, and then you can get them into anything that can get them into that 30, 40, 50, 60,000 year job range, that's truly transformative, because it saves not just them, but their future family potential and so much the social ills that we have to deal with in society. So that's my little talk about why I think that micro-credentials have far more potential impact on our society than getting kids into Ivy League college.
No, and that's how the article really starts. Like, it really profiles a blue collar worker like that, and it draws an analogy to almost like going to a food court and buying items, individual side items. Like, you get your onions and you get your mushrooms and you get your cinnamon apples or you get your caramelized bananas, and at a diner. And it profiles this lady named Amy Nelson, and it goes on to say that's what she's learned to do with micro-credentials. And so it starts out kind of using more of a blue collar example. So let's close with that. So thanks, Dave. Let's close with that. So thanks, Dave.